What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to FudgeMuppet. I'm Scott here with Michael and Drew, as always, and today we are talking all about the Daedric Prince of Nightmares, Vaermina. Which one of you guys would like to start us off? Oh, quick! Daedrologist Drew, let's go!
Well, in the words of Uriel Septim VII, she's the one from your dreams. She's the Lady of Nightmares. She's a weird one. She's considered fairly malevolent. And what's, I think, most interesting about her is with most Daedra, I feel like you have your established Daedra worshippers who go to shrines in the middle of the forest where no one's going to see them, and they all do their weird cultic rituals. And when it comes to Vaermina, the idea is that her domain is in your dreams, and everyone sleeps, and even the most devout Daedra worshipper in some way is going to have some dealings with Vaermina, whether they know it or not.
There's actually a quote from a book in Elder Scrolls Online called "Dreamers, Our Time Has Come." It says, "We will gather our armies of dreamers. Then we will all return to the city of lies, the city of Wayrest. The heresy of the Eight will be torn down. The dreamers will ascend. Wayrest will become our city of dreams. And I'm a big dreamer." That's all I could think of reading that.
Interestingly, it's probably a little too early to go down such a crazy road, but when you bring in like the whole concept of the dream sleeve, which is a really loose concept anyway, but it's the idea there's a few little mentions throughout the lore about it, and it's the idea that it's where all souls kind of go after they're dead and they sort of get recycled, but also when you sleep, that is kind of where you are in the dream sleeve. And the idea behind Dagoth, for example, was that like he was kind of awake in the dream sleeve, dreaming himself into reality, like the reverse of it. It's more complicated than that, but it's a very, very simplified version of it. But it kind of makes me wonder at how much of Vaermina's influence is kind of interconnected with that, or whether it is just sort of part of things. Like her, do you know what I mean? Like how much
do you think it can potentially be
have
misconstrued as her effect on people when it's actually just the dream sleeve that people are experiencing in their sleep?
Well, kind of. Like I'm sort of going the idea that basically perhaps that all dreams are not her, but she does. Dreams and nightmares are her constructs that she does and she uses to, get in while people are in the dream sleeve. But it's not everything, because otherwise it's like the entire dream sleeve theoretically could be her domain.
Then she'd be way too powerful. I think a good way of looking at it is the same way you'd look at other Daedric princes. So we could take Mehrunes Dagon for an example and say part of his sphere is ambition and revolution. But we don't say every ambitious character in the Elder Scrolls is the work of Dagon. We don't say that every revolution is the work of Dagon. So in the same way, I mean, perhaps you could say every nightmare, if you wanted to stretch it to that, is the work of Vaermina. But I mean, when does a nightmare become a dream as well? Like, it's all quite subjective, because I've had dreams that you would think are nightmares, but my feeling within them is not freaked out. So therefore it's more like a very trippy dream.
Because I guess the implication with her is that if your dream is scary, then your mind doesn't wander to the dream sleeve or whatever happens, but it instead goes to a realm of oblivion, to her realm of oblivion. And it almost seems more likely that what she does, which is kind of what Daedra do in general, especially the Daedra Lords, when they're creating their own creatures and their own realms, is they mimic what they see in the Mundus. And perhaps she has an understanding of the fact that mortals dream, there's no mention of it, but I doubt a lesser Daedra dream, but maybe she sees that mortals dream and she mimics this and then puts this on these kind of like comatose mortals that aren't sleeping naturally, and uses these nightmares to kind of control them or communicate with them in a way that isn't your normal dream.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's just kind of a tricky spot. I was just looking at to double check like what kind of canon stuff there is for the dream sleeve, and it's really, really few.
Yeah,
there's like basically like,
and a lot of it is from like older games where what it meant is kind of different. It's very confusing.
Yeah, so we kind of have to like, a lot of it becomes from like Kirkbride sort of outer lore stuff. But I just want everyone to keep that in mind, because, for example, like if you completely like disregard the dream sleeve, you could kind of conceptualize that it's all nightmares and dreams of Vaermina, but it's not some like I have control over all where souls go afterwards. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I mean, in the most general sense as well, Vaermina is quite like a, quote, evil Daedric Prince. Like, in different reports and sources, they do tend to refer to her as someone who enjoys destruction for its own sake, and who enjoys torture and things like that. Which makes sense, considering her realm is kind of like, if we read, The Doors of Oblivion, every few minutes there was a flash of lightning and reality shifted always to something more horrible and horrifying. A dark castle one moment, a den of ravening beasts. The next, a moonlit swamp, a coffin where he was buried alive. Fear got the better of my master and he quickly passed to the next realm. So that is kind of what she embodies. I do like, though, the more nuanced takes of how her sphere can be useful, or like you see in Oblivion with the cultists saying like, oh, because of the nightmares I experience, nothing comes close to scaring me by comparison, like as in nightmares to make you strong, fear to make you strong, because everything in the mortal world won't be as scary as her nightmares.
See, I actually think I guess this is my take on her. I know she's referred to as Prince of Dreams and Nightmares, and then you often get, like, there's, what is it? The Dream Weaver as well. But I would say that, like, all of the nightmares and darker parts are, like, the bigger emphasis. And almost you could say that she is more so like a Daedric Prince of fear through, like, nightmares. But like, everything, she never really, I guess, takes ownership of a dream where, you go into a beautiful meadow and it's all like nice and stuff. It's always some bad kind of thing. And I love the Khajiit interpretation where she's Vaermina, the lost daughter. And she was said to be a child of Fatimai, born out of her mother's fear of losing her children.
As opposed to being like part of the litters, which is how most of the gods came to be. She's kind of born not naturally is how they perceive it.
Yeah, and being born of fear anyway, that's another sort of just little like thing in the mythology that kind of, she's the embodiment of fear that then haunts the Khajiit afterwards with nightmares. Like, there's always this haunting, fearful kind of stuff.
And even more to make it less tangible, isn't the idea as well that it's kind of like she can drag you off the path with fear, but she can't actually harm the lunar lattice, which makes it gives me this vibe of like, your nightmares aren't real.
It's like fear, the greatest fear is fear itself kind of idea. Is that she's not actually physically harming you, she's just making you scared to follow. And
kind of leveraging that too, like obviously nightmares and fear more broadly, like, which is, with the nightmares she can cause fear in mortals. That's kind of how she seems to direct a lot of events happening and so on. And there's do you know what I mean? Like, like the guy with the artist in the Sheogorath story and so on.
Which we'll get to in some detail.
But it's the manipulation through the use of fear, through nightmares as the delivery method. But that is what
it's also prophecy as well, in a way. Like, she sends visions and things like that to dreams, and like, omens and signs that danger is coming. But generally that danger's hers. It's kind of like, here's an omen. It's me. I'm
it's just kind of indirect. Like, if you imagine Dagon physically manifests to destroy a city, whereas she's more the kind of prince who will implant an idea in a mortal's mind and it will come to reality as a result of that. But I mean, you can also, the evil aspect of her, you could potentially chalk it up to the fact she's one of the princes we know less about. But it's kind of, I associate it with her lack of motive. It doesn't really seem like there's a reason to do it beyond the enjoyment of making mortals afraid or tormenting them. It's not like physical torture, but mental torture. And it's something that you get the idea that she's just enjoying it for the sake of it.
For some reason, like, it'd be a fun, like, interpretation, like comparing it to like the monster It from the Stephen King novel, where like feeding on fear and the idea of producing fear and scaring other people is like, because really seems to be like one of her like greatest motives.
When you look into the kind of things her followers say, particularly in the Elder Scrolls Online, there is this whole concept though of like her nightmares and dreams and visions, whatever, being the truth, and that like reality is a lie, but it doesn't really get deep enough to be like convincing. And I'm like, okay, why is it all lies? Why are the nightmares the truth?
here's a thematic opposite to that. The Skull of Corruption, keyword corruption, is her artifact. And then what it does in at least in Oblivion and previous games and so on, it creates a sort of clone of yourself, which is a darker version or clone of you. But to me, at least, the corrupted version implies like not the reality or not the true. So I'd actually say, in opposed to that, I would believe like, you can debate it out. It's still up for debate, but I just think that leads me to believe that the nightmares and the fear and everything is not the truth, but the corruption. And perhaps it's just the followers of her going, oh, no, it's true.
It gives me a lot of vibes with that other self, like a more evil version. Like when people in psychology look at different archetypes and they say this is like a shadow version of this. Just like a kind of negative opposite version with like bad traits and all of the undesirable elements.
And that's the thing, it's like dreams they're designed to be believable. Maybe when you wake up things are a little different, but when you're dreaming, I mean, I've never had a lucid dream, but
really
never. But when I'm dreaming, it's as real as can be. Even if I wake up, like, that's the most ridiculous thing I could ever conceive. Yeah, so I don't know, but either way, it's believable, right. And that's kind of her grift.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, all my questions stemming from that about you personally and lucid dreams. Like, I'm not thinking of Vaermina anymore.
No, never. Nothing good ever happens to me in dreams either. It's like the second something good's about to happen, I'll wake up.
Interpret that how you will.
Bad. I had one like not long ago where like there was like some shadowy figure. I was actually taking a piss, and it was also real because it was in my bathroom upstairs. And when I woke up, I actually needed to take a piss.
Oh, so you didn't piss the bed?
No, I didn't piss the bed. But what happened was I was like peeing, and then all of a sudden I turn around. There's this sort of shadowy figure, and then it like surges toward me, and I remember actually kind of turning and pissing on it. But then it slit my throat, and I woke up instantly, and I was so like out of whack. I was like, whoa, like,
that's crazy, man.
Vaermina's work.
Wow.
We're gonna have so many people analyzing you now that you've given details.
Yeah, get some psychoanalysis going on.
But that's brutal, attacking a man when he's most vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, Vaermina does seem to be quite evil. Like her followers, it is quite typical, but sacrifice, things like this, they're all part of it. Like sacrificing cultists to her and helping her take control of other people through their dreams or nightmares and manipulating them. All of those things.
It's also to like what end? Like I feel like maybe the cultists or whatever play a bigger part in her desires and manipulation. Like what I'm sort of saying is I feel like Vaermina's sort of sphere doesn't really depend on it's not contingent on a lot of things to happen. They just need to be mortals who fear something. And then she can create nightmares and manipulating through fear or whatnot. But there's no like sort of, for example, we brought up Dagon. Dagon's kind of thing is there has like the revolution. There has to be a sort of thing and the mortals need to be pushed to do something, or you know what I mean? Versus Vaermina where it's just kind of, or even like Molag Bal is about domination. So to dominate is kind of like his fear, is sort of goal of things. But what Vaermina just kind of...
It is ambiguous. It's really hard to see the extent of her influence. Like, you've got these cults, like in Skyrim where you've got this torpor, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it induces long sleeps so that they can experience more of Vaermina's influence. And I mean, like, connecting that to alchemy, it's interesting that she gets associated with alchemy. And I was thinking about that, and it's like, maybe if you've got potions that put a kind of hallucinatory state on you or affect your way of thinking in a way that's very similar to dreams and nightmares, because it's kind of like altering your perception of what is real and what is in your realm.
Yeah.
Versus the dream world, and that once again, I don't want to go on too many tangents, but kind of connects to her quests, where it seems that her realm and the mortal realm can kind of intertwine when where her artifacts are found.
Yeah, like with the Orb of Vaermina in Oblivion, where Arkved steals it and then basically falls asleep having nightmares eternally, and you go to get it, and he's basically brought this nightmare realm into his little
which
tower
is a really
and
cool
everywhere.
Thing to experience the first time.
I think as well with the torpor, because the torpor is interesting because it allows you to actually traverse through space after you come back from it. So you drink it and vanish, and then you can reappear a few feet away or thousands of miles away from where you drank it, depending on where you go in the dream. But this is where it gets tricky, because when you start reading into Vaermina, a lot of the time they reference memories as well. But the torpor and going into the dream stride specifically mentions dreams. But in the Skyrim quest, you go seemingly into Aranda's memories of the past. So it gets a bit weird because Aranda, at least from my memory, is not sleeping when he gives you the potion to drink. He also doesn't explain it all. I have a video called Should You Kill Aranda, which actually exposes him as way more, not sinister, but like tricky and conniving, and perhaps why you'd have reason to not trust him from a role-playing perspective based on the different dialogue options he says. Because you can die. There's a whole thing where if you die in the dream with the torpor, you don't necessarily die IRL, but you can. And you can reappear back, like split in half or fully deceased. And he basically tells you like, nah, drink it, it's fine. There's no harm from it. But then other dialogue will contradict that, and in his past life, he was a bad dude. I mean, he was a Vaermina cultist before he found Mara, and he even says, I've done all this dark art stuff and I've killed more than I care to remember, and he's naughty boy.
It's an interesting point there, just about the memory, but like really, you could also argue that, I mean, it depends on your like philosophies about things, but generally dreams and sort of any sort of like nightmare or whatever is based upon memories of things you've seen remixed and rejumbled in a way, in the same way that like there's no such thing as like a completely 100% original like concept idea. It's always a remix of something, like how
like a dream being synthesized memories.
Yeah, aliens being bug-eye and all that kind of stuff. It's like someone's seen bugs and someone's remixed it into a sort of alien kind of thing. But what I'm saying is all of these nightmares and dreams and so on would somewhat probably seem contingent on like the memories of someone. So I wonder what access she has to the memories. And if you do buy into the whole like dream sleeve thing where all of the souls go into the dream sleeve, maybe she does have some sort of like leak into the dream sleeve where she can kind of like manipulate the souls or something in there, and that's how she's sort of getting in, and I don't know, like what kind of possibilities you could have with like maybe implanting false memories, Inception style, or like or suggestions.
Well, you can
like in their dreams, and
it does. I mean, if we want to actually talk about some of her motives and things like that, there's a whole thing in the Elder Scrolls Online where there's this whole task of destroying the Daggerfall Covenant from within. There's a character called Galthus who was Vaermina's lover and champion, which is interesting to consider. Like, you hear of different Daedra having lovers, but Vaermina also has had a lover. And he was a young Breton noble bored with the waking world, the regular life. And basically, Vaermina calls upon him. He becomes her first night caller. But when you find him in the Elder Scrolls Online, he's like a big bone colossus. That's what he's turned into. So, I mean,
spooky skeleton.
Yeah, but it's just interesting that they are planning to kind of destroy the Daggerfall Covenant. Like, there is some kind of political element or aim there that isn't just like, ooh, spooky, like nightmares and torture for the sake of it. I mean, that can also, it could just be destruction for the sake of it, because there is actually an older text that talks about all the different Daedra, and it lists like 5 of them, and then essentially says they do destructive things for destruction's sake. We know Dagon embodies that the most. And I don't remember the name of the text, but it's one of the like typical, it's not a solely an Elder Scrolls Online text. And it talks about how all 5 of these certain Daedra, Vaermina being one of them, do things just for destruction's sake. So I don't know, what do you think her motive would be in messing with the Daggerfall Covenant and messing with King Emmerich?
In part, we can explore
Elder Scrolls Online writers,
but it kind of does become that a lot of them, whenever it regards a Daedra, they sort of like reduce it to just the most basic sort of goal, like, oh, we got to destroy something or take over something, or like it kind of, you never really get like a more like a deeper sort of plot, I think, a lot of the time. Like, look, it's at the end, they need to fill their MMO with quests, items, and so on. In the same way, by the way, if you scroll down on the US wiki, the Night Haunt Gloomspore Sench, believed to glow thanks to the influence of Vaermina's artifacts. But like, these kinds of like whack things that they just put in is because they need more content, more stuff in the crown store, more quests, more stuff. So sometimes it kind of becomes, even if some is quality, you're just going to have so much quantity that it's hard to quality control every single thing that jams into it. So anyway, but yeah, let's so like we can use that as a preface for exploring this. So what I meant by that too is that like you can take it with somewhat of a grain of salt, and sort of like you don't want to necessarily like expand the definition of every prince to everything for the sake of fitting in new quests and like, do you know what I mean?
Because there's this whole cult like of Azura worshippers who are at odds with the Vaermina cult and have been there. It's started by an orc leader named Abbot Durak, leader of the Spirit Wardens, who grew up in Orsinium and was kind of made fun of for his interest in magic and being physically inferior to the other orcs. And then he left, and Azura spoke to him, and he made this order which would, its kind of purpose was to be as a defender against Vaermina cultists, which, you know.
Well, what do we think in terms of like, what is the point of Vaermina? Because maybe it's like Vaermina, maybe it is because, like, you know, like we said, like these people have personalities, and if the Breton noble is all excited, you know, and is a lover of Vaermina and is sort of wants the sort of excitement of nightmares, but in the real world they want to destroy the Daggerfall Covenant and so on. Like maybe it is just a personal, like, oh, my friend wants to, you know, my friend or lover really wants this thing. Okay, let's do it, rather than necessarily like a something that's necessitated by Vaermina or that she really needs. It's more so for his benefit because she like.
That's kind of how I'm perceiving it too. It's like Vaermina just allows people to do these things, and I mean, in a sense, it is extremely unpredictable because, you know, we've kind of been over this, but she when she puts visions in people's minds or like enhances people's dreams and nightmares, it's mostly just for the sake of like putting creepy things in there. It generally isn't like, oh, you know, trying to indoctrinate mortals to do da. I mean, if she wanted to do that, she could probably be very successful, because one thing with Vaermina is if she gives someone a vision in their dreams, she can really make that individual believe that they are thinking this themselves. It's not quite as direct as going to a Daedric prince and asking for favor and asking for help.
Something to remember too, a lot of the time the way the gods can and the Daedra can kind of work is like really they are, you know, kids with a magnifying glass and ants. Like a lot of the things can be just trivial. In the same way that the whole story with the artist and the 16 Accords of Madness and the bet between Sheogorath and Vaermina, it's just a trivial, like, let's have a game. Let's see who's better.
Should we summarize that for listeners? I'm happy
Go
to.
for it.
Essentially, there is a man named Darius Shano, and Vaermina basically sends him nightmares, and he uses these to create art. Sheogorath and Vaermina have a contest of who can make him more hated, and they each take a turn, and she goes and sends him all of this, the most disturbing nightmares and art from which he draws inspiration and makes all this super disturbing, crazy writings and different things for people. But basically what ends up happening is he gets popular because it's kind of interesting art. He does get a bunch of people that hate him, but essentially he's polarizing. When Sheogorath has his turn, he does nothing. And basically what happens is Darius gets kind of spiteful with the gods that his visions have gone, that Vaermina's deserted him. But then he starts thinking, there probably never was any gods. And then he starts getting really bitter and making fun of society, you know, as a whole, and becoming quite satirical, but like more and more starts making fun of the priests, the king, like really important people. And he gets publicly executed because of it. And then Sheogorath wins because he truly became the most hated.
So basically, when you run out of creativity, you turn to political commentary.
Yeah. Essentially. He was an emerging bard and poet, I should say. But he does all kinds of things. In short, the whole... It's sacrilege.
In short, the whole...
Sacrilege.
Yeah, so the whole thing was just like, let's have a game between the Daedric princes, like, who's better. Basically, there was no grand purpose to using these nightmares or something, and that's something you can kind of assume with Daedra in general, as they come from sort of Padme, the chaos, so they are more of a chaotic type of thing. Like there's not necessarily some grand divine purpose to every one of their actions, and especially so with Vaermina when it's as random as fear and nightmares and so on. It encapsulates such a broad thing, and it's almost like what is her goal, even if you want to go with the idea that they want everyone to be scared and have nightmares, then you want more warped things happening in the world. Is one way you can.
I'll just read the last 2 lines of the 16 Accords of Madness because I just like them. Indeed, Darius Shana was a glorious mortal, despised by his own people, his kings, and even by the gods he mocked. For my success, I shall accept 70 followers of Vaermina into my service, and the dreamers will awaken as madmen. And thus did Sheogorath teach Vaermina that without madness there are no dreams and no creation. Vaermina will never forget this lesson. So it's interesting, in a sense, that, madness is kind of needed.
There's definitely a crossover between the two of them. A little bit. Because you can talk about dreams and you can talk about madness when you're talking about imagination. Imagination can really be associated with both of those princes. Except just with Vaermina, the imagination's a bit more gruesome.
I guess the crossover, I would say, kind of would be linked more to like the whole dementia sort of half of the sort of Sheogorath, the things like, paranoia, fear of things and so on. Obviously, like, the depression and all of that kind of stuff.
Well, like, also, with the Skull of Corruption creating a mimic clone of someone, it's kind of schizophrenic in a sense.
Yeah, in a way.
So, like instead of hearing voices in your head, she's kind of physically manifesting that would, not literally, but as far as you can perceive, in your dreams, which become your reality, you're creating these things. And
I'll read you.
So there's definitely crossover.
I'll read you some more insight, or at least things from followers of Vaermina and Elder Scrolls Online, seeing as you love it so much, to try and get more of an insight into what their deal is. So there's a lot of talk about them being truth seekers in the way that they speak. They keep talking about a broken world of lies and suffering, referring to the real world. Always remember, dreamers, that nightmares are Vaermina's truest sendings, piercing the veils that prevent us from seeing the world as it truly is. There's a lot of talk about converting everyone you meet and slaying all those who refuse quite zealously. Her revelries call to us from across Tamriel. Her dreams have shown us a true world, a far better world than the one you know. Vaermina lights the sky of our world. Vaermina is the stars of our world. Her 1,000 truths are 1,000 lights in the night sky. The wakeful world is full of suffering and starvation. It is a world of lies. We have come from all corners of this broken world to gather as dreamers of a new, brighter age. We will leave this world of lies behind us. She has awakened us to a better world. Some cannot comprehend these simple truths. They do not understand her dreams as we do, for they are not true dreamers. She calls the mighty and the humble, yet those who are found wanting are cast down into madness. Awaken, sleeper, ascend, dreamer, seek her in dreams and join us. We await you. I cut some from that wasn't necessary, but that is the gist of it. I feel like it's very source. Trust me, bro. It's not telling me. It's not telling me the truth. It's going, do your research.
Even there, like Vaermina, like the stars of our world, is just like, well, you're wrong, bro. It's the Magna Gear. It's the tolls of that. It's just like,
even then, to extrapolate on what they are saying, it's easy to imagine why a lot of people would be drawn to Vaermina, even though she's considered evil by most and seems to feed on your fear, because obviously the real world is brutal and it's not always fair, and that you may just be a nobody and there's nothing you can do to break out from that. But in your dreams, you're anything you want. In your dreams, things can be incredible, and it's exactly as you paint it.
What makes me curious about it is they're like, the wakeful world is full of suffering and starvation. It's a world of lies and all this kind of stuff. It's like, have you been to Quagmire? Like, have you had nightmares? Like, they're not pleasant either. They oftentimes worse than the reality of the world. Like, what's this sort of like promised land that they're actually trying to achieve?
And the Elder Scrolls world has a lot of nice stuff in it too. As much as there would be bad things like any fantasy world, there's plenty of nice things as well.
But I guess if you've got these alchemical potions that allow you to, like I think the torpor, the idea is that you sleep for long periods of time and you don't age as fast.
Wait,
I
no.
need to check the
The
source on that.
torpor is the one that lets you travel through dreams and memories.
Okay.
What
am I
you're thinking of the miasma, which is like a gas that they put through Nightcaller Temple and puts everyone to sleepy time.
So it's kind of like, imagine you've got a bunch of people who are kind of societal outcasts. I mean, they've turned to Daedra worship in the first place. They go to this place where there's this miasma, and essentially it's like, kindergarten nap time forever, and you don't age, and you just get to dream amazing dreams and have your milkies and ducks. But you know what I mean? It's like,
I don't know if
you
that
could
was
imagine
their intention.
No, but I mean, you could theoretically have that happen a lot, where all these dreamers are like, "Oh my god, the dream world is glorious, and the real world."
Dude,
sucks.
it just sounds like absolute maximum escapism. It's not a search for truth. It's like, put me in my own dream world.
That was only
Bro, do you know how many hours I've got on Skyrim? What do you think I've been doing, bro?
Yeah, but to be fair, that was only because orc invaders came and tried to kill him, and they were like, "We're gonna die. Let's activate emergency measures." But I'm sure it's abused, especially when you read about how it's not just Vaermina's torpor, but there are other alchemical things that we don't know about. It's just mentioned that some of her followers are master alchemists, and some of their potions can fetch like 10,000 septims plus. So I'm sure they make all kinds of trippy, interesting things to consume, like escapism-based things, like just agreeing with you, Scott.
Yeah, they're just a bunch of con men, to be honest. Like, they're cultists. Like, I don't think any of the truth thing really stands the ground. Like we said about the Skull of Corruption, I don't buy in the whole idea.
The Orb of Vaermina is potentially meant to have like this kind of scrying ability, which kind of plays into the theme of like seeing the things for what they are, or kind of unveiling the truth. But I mean, I think that's stretching it quite a bit. Particularly when you look at her omens, she's said to kind of like have different omens, right? But okay, so here's a quote. "Last night, dreamers, Vaermina sent an omen of mortal foreboding to me. It ordained a death among us. I sense a prisoner will die soon." But it's very easy to make these things a self-fulfilling prophecy when, you either like sacrifice a prisoner, or there's a literal like watcher Daedra, those Hermaeus Mora things with the eyes, doing kind of iniquitous things. It's the work of Vaermina. It's kind of saying like, "Oh, I sense that, Scott, you're gonna fall over tomorrow. I sense it, and then I push you over tomorrow." Like, did I really sense it?
Yeah, it's.
I'm not buying it. I'm not buying Vaermina's truths.
No, I don't buy it. Especially too when you kind of look at, for example, like if you want to talk about dreams and nightmares and so on, they're often, you could look at, Dagoth being the false dreamer, and he is basically in the dream sleep dreaming himself into reality kind of stuff. There's this kind of already, through him, a connotation of like, that's false. Like him being from there, like dreaming himself into reality is like not a it's not real. It's kind of what I'm saying is like the dreams are fake. They're not real. They're not Mundus. They're not the real thing. So this whole idea that like all of these, in Vaermina's realm and all of her dreams and nightmares, she's the truth and everything like that just seems really diluted. In the same way that kind of similar-ish, how Dagoth deluded himself into believing he exists. But I won't go into that too much. But I'm just trying to point out that the dream sleeve on dreams in general are obviously... They're separate from Mundus, and they're not some like grand truth.
I'll read you another thing about her omens, which makes it more physical. Okay, the omen of deception.
Story time.
And the subtext of the title of this source is how to summon the omen of deception. Amid the deep layers of the realm of Quagmire resides a spirit who has long yearned to wreak destruction upon the mortals of Nirn, to spread lies and deception across their tawdry realm. Like, how about that? It's literally saying, let's summon this thing that spreads lies and deception, so we can spread the truth. Anyway, among all of Vaermina's pets, this spirit remains the most hidden, the most secretive. He is known by many names, but none of them are true, which has made his summoning impossible for centuries. But Vaermina whispered his secret name in my sleeping ear last night while I dreamt of darkness. She bid me to unleash his foul influence in Tamriel and to drive the people of that world to distrust and betrayal. To summon the Omen of Deception, you must first light the 4 braziers, slay whomever you offer...
Brazzers.
What? Mate? You being cheeky. Slay whomever you offer as sacrifice, and finally speak the Daedra's true name, or Nimic. So the sacrificial blood must be freshly spilled, but take great care to ensure the sacrifice is fully dead. If the sacrifice were to retain any trace of life, the Daedra would be summoned in a weak and susceptible state, and were something to happen to her pet, Vaermina would not be pleased. The Daedra's true name is Ykal. Speak it, and he will come. Oh no. But make sure his vessel is prepared. So, sounds like she's just deceptive and that all her truths are a bit of a meme. A bit fake news.
Yeah. I feel like look, they're a cult anyway, like crazy cult.
But at least other cults have some kind of like convincing truth and cohesive structure of argument.
I think we need to learn more. We need more of Vaermina before we can truly properly shit on her. We need to know for a fact. Because
wrote a video a while back. There was like 3 Daedric princes that need more love or whatever, and Vaermina was most definitely one of them. There's not a lot that's explored about her really. Like it's funny, she comes up a decent amount, but her like depth, it's very like shallow or obscured. And obscured is only a critique that will only be considered true if there is actually more we learn about, because we're just assuming it's there. Like she could just be completely undercooked and there's nothing in the lore there. But they need to flesh her out in some interesting sort of ways.
There is a lot of potential, to have, like as we've just talked about with these kind of cults of that they've somewhat been misled. There's a lot of potential for enemies and quest lines in Elder Scrolls 6.
It would be interesting to see a cult that are all like artists and poets and bards and things having nightmares and like using it as inspiration and saying it's like so necessary, so they worship incessantly to try and like produce cooler and cooler stuff.
I reckon they should really hone in on the fear part and like of fear being a big part of it. Like, because that's, what a nightmare is. It's a big scary thing. And like having something like, imagine some sort of, king that's in cahoots with Vaermina, but basically using fear and nightmares and dreams of someone to actually control and oppression. So there's a reason for him to be there. Or there's other applications, but they can think of more interesting things
rather than... You can also try and pull
than...
out the positives as well and really focus on like, being fearless through exposure to fear. Or using fear to, push you in the right direction in life because you're so scared of what will happen if you don't. And like, there's all kinds of like double-edged sword type themes you could add to make it more interesting than it currently is. I guess one of the last things I should talk about, and it's not really confirmed whether these are the work of Vaermina's, but I thought it's interesting lore, and I don't know what other podcast it would fit better into than this one. But there is a text called Dreamwalkers, which is observations by Reynard, an academic of Mournhold. So they call them Dreamwalkers, being that with a simple spell they can step into the dreams of another. Your darkest desires, your most bizarre fantasies, your true self, all revealed to these Dreamwalkers like an open book. Your most prized memories ransacked and picked through like the leavings of last night's feast. So, those who dreamwalk are said to have sworn themselves to the Daedric Prince Vaermina, to have sold their souls for the ability to enter her plane, the dream stride. The veracity of this claim I cannot say, but the similarities between what dreamwalkers do and what the priests of Vaermina accomplish is quite uncanny. However, the dreamwalkers don't require any potion, so now I'm kind of just paraphrasing. Whereas the priests tend to at least require like a drop of an alchemical concoction to do so, apparently. But essentially, it ends up talking about these mysterious dreamwalkers actually being a force for good in a way. And what happens is the writer, his wife and children contracted the Nahatan flu, and had this slow, painful, terrible death, and he's like miserable about it. And what they essentially do is like memory surgery. So they go into his mind and enter his dreams, and when he wakes up he feels very calm, and basically whatever they did, they eliminate that kind of pain and trauma from his brain using their memory walking methods or dream walking methods. But then he kind of concludes philosophically going, was it right to take away that pain? Aren't memories the thing that make us unique? Have I become someone else because my memories have been changed? So what
sounds kind of
that makes me think of hallucinogens again. You know, like treating PTSD with hallucinogens. That's exactly what that sounds like. Yeah. That or like a Nightmare on Elm Street kind of. If someone turns evil with that.
But it's interesting, particularly because there's all these ties to Vaermina's realm. What are you laughing at?
Dude, my mind is stuck on surgery. I was doing surgery on a grape. The second you said surgery, like a memory surgery, I'm just like, is it as difficult as surgery on a grape?
Who knows?
That's what my brain was.
Maybe we'll find out.
The best quality memes here.
Hey, look, we all know that memes age like fine wine. The older the meme
is. Well, it's a grape, you know.
Whoa. Nice.
So
nice.
No, if anyone listens to these podcasts in like a year when these memes are all long dead, it's going to be
they're already long dead.
I remember there was a
now.
Witcher video. There was a Witcher video like a couple of years ago. I was going to put in a reference to that spaghetti. Do you remember that? Like, you touch my spaghetti. I was like, actually, I'm not, because this meme is going to be forgotten in a week.
But that's the point. That's the point. Yeah. That's why it's funny. It's funny in 5 years from now to say, my name Jeff.
It's like a timestamp for history as well, if you do put them in when they are relevant.
It's funny how the older they become. But
it's going to be in history textbooks in 100 years for kids to study.
So what do you think of the Dreamwalkers then? Do you reckon they have something to do with Vaermina, or like Vaermina cultists using their power for good and they've kind of turned away and now they try and help people, like Aranda but without finding Mara? Or are they just another obscure thing?
I get the vibe that it's more like an obscure thing, like a side practice of magic. In the same way, for example, that conjuration is to do with, summoning from the planes of oblivion, but that doesn't necessarily mean everyone who conjures from oblivion is in cahoots with it.
You're liking this cahoots word today.
I don't know. It's just popped into my head.
Maybe Vaermina put it there with some memory surgery.
She did. Yeah, she's in cahoots with the Shadow Man that cut my throat while I was pissing.
I'm sure. Anyway, it's actually funny because I had some nightmares last night, but I don't remember them. I wish I did because I'd tell them, but it happened. It knew and I rarely have them, so it's almost as if it was fate that we would do this podcast today. But that brings me to the end of Vaermina Things. Thank you everyone for listening. Tell us about your funniest nightmares in the comments below. If you're willing to share, of course. Like the video.
Your most traumatic experiences. Tell us.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. Social media links in the description, and we look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.